Time now for Talking Points with Charlie Kirk, founder of Turning Point USA. Charlie, we watch the news and we see two things. Progressive liberals are trying to undermine the American Republic both from outside and from within. Let's talk about outside first. These Antifa riots in the nation's capital over the weekend, staggering. You had a handful of white supremacists and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Antifa rioters. It's not the white supremacists who attack cops, who knock down reporters, who punch journalists in the face. Talk a little bit about the Antifa uprising in America.
Well, these are thugs, and this is the gang of the Democrat Party. They have resorted to thuggish tactics where they don't want to hear other ideas. Instead, they want to silence those ideas. And what I have found to be most troubling is the lack of denouncing of these radicals and these fringe voices within the Democrat Party. It's almost as if the Democrat leaders are okay with the sort of behavior that they have been conducting themselves with. And so, personally, I've experienced this. But this is the type of playbook that they're having, is that they want civil unrest. They want it to be impossibly a Trump supporter. They go after these sorts of voices and these sorts of people, and it makes a much more dangerous and unsettled society because of that.
Yeah, and I can sit here and say, and I know you'll second me on this as we sit here today, that anybody who has a white supremacist ideology is somebody who should be consigned to the ash heap of history. Having said that, you have all the violence, all the threats. And the thing that gets me about Antifa, 2 weeks ago, you guys were threatened. You and Candace were threatened by Antifa. And no one really could do anything about it. There was no widespread cause in the Democrat Party, politicians shouting down this kind of behavior at all. In fact, a lot of them are complicit with it, as you just said. But the violence that we're seeing now, the fact that their own liberal allies, Antifa is attacking their own liberal media allies. And the media doesn't want to report about it. The media would rather talk about a handful of white supremacists than the fact that Antifa is actually attacking the free press.
That's right. So Antifa went after NBC News, and they don't even attack it. I mean, they don't even cover it. It's so strange. Could you imagine if conservative, Trump-supporting, Make America Great Again hat-wearing people went after the press and did what Antifa did? It would be the #1 news story on every network. The war on press is real. We don't feel safe. Well, in reality, you don't feel safe. You shouldn't feel safe from liberals that are coming and attacking you. Yet you stay selectively silent during this. And it kind of begs the question, why is it that the left is so accepting of Antifa radicals, yet they don't even report on when they get attacked by their own radicals? And that kind of cannibalization that is beginning to happen in the Democrat ranks is only going to get worse as this midterm season ends and the presidential primary season begins. We're going to have a very, very interesting political dynamic here. But it's stunning to me that the media says, "Oh, we feel unsafe at Trump rallies. We feel unsafe," and then they actually get attacked by leftists and they remain silent.
Yeah, that's the point to drive home here, that the American media, particularly CNN leading the charge, accuses Donald Trump of being anti-media, any media violence that is going to happen in the violence against the media that's going to happen in the near future. That's got to be Donald Trump's fault. Here you have left-wing Antifa thugs attacking the media, and CNN has nothing to say. In fact, CNN doubled down on defending Antifa. Chris Cuomo, one of the lead anchors at CNN, said Antifa should not be equated with white supremacists, arguing that, quote, in a clash between hate and those who oppose it are on the side of right, even when they resort to petty violence.
I mean, so explain to me what they were resisting when they came and stormed Candace and I out of a restaurant. And that's what I would be my challenge to Chris Cuomo, of which he did not mention once, of which he did not talk about. And this is another example of Antifa going after peaceful individuals that were just enjoying a meal and trying to be, private citizens. Antifa comes in with their thugs, screams at us, put bullhorns in our ears, whistles, you name it. Explain to me how that is morally acceptable. I mean, what kind of hate were they resisting there? And that's the problem, is that the left is they're very smart this way. They redefine what is a hate group. They move the goalpost, because then I become all of a sudden acceptable to go protest and be able to go after. I can then be silent, so on and so forth. And that's wrong and that's dangerous. And you and I believe more speech is the answer. I will defend hateful people to be able to speak. Shutting them up is not the answer. Instead, allowing more speech and more people to express their opinions is always the best way to go up against bad ideas that might be given a platform.
Yeah, and now let's talk about shift now. We talked about how the progressive left is piggybacking with Antifa to undermine the republic outside of Washington, D.C. Inside of Washington, at the White House itself, we have a couple of episodes about how deep staters, particularly Peter Strzok at the FBI, was recently just fired. He's got a GoFundMe page now, Charlie. Talk a little bit about how progressives are trying to undermine the country from within.
Well, they are. I mean, look, the deep state is very real, and Peter Strzok is an example of that. But it makes you think this is only the piece of evidence that we have. How many other pieces of action? How much else did he do to actually undermine the legitimacy of the FBI? There are deep state actors within the Environmental Protection Agency, within the FTC, within every single government agency that goes after people that they politically disagree with, within the IRS, so on and so forth. And Strzok is only one particular example, and this is something that the Marxists understand so well, is they have to infiltrate. And they've infiltrated these huge government bureaucracies with people that absolutely, totally hate America. And they want to destroy the rule of law. They want to take over our courts because they know that as long as they if they can ever control the courts, we can never adjudicate the abuse. Right now, thankfully, we do have a Supreme Court majority that we're going to probably get because of Kavanaugh, and hopefully we can keep it. And as long as we do have that, we're able to then sue these government agencies and expose their out-of-bounds behavior. But if we were to look at the Ninth Circuit as any sort of indication, they don't want that sort of abuse to be called out upon or adjudicated against. And you see Strzok, you see Lois Lerner, you see these deep state actors that thankfully he was fired, but there should be a couple million more bureaucrats fired. I can't imagine the sort of abuse of power that goes on at some of these agencies that we haven't been able to unearth and will never know about. It just Strzok was so reckless of those text messages. If it wasn't for those texts, we would never have known the sort of behavior that he was engaging in.
You know, it's a kind of really venal hypocrisy that we already talked about how the progressive left defends violence as morality with Antifa. Strzok did the same thing on his Facebook page when he set up his GoFundMe account. He basically said, we need this money, we need to raise money to fight the immoral presidency of Donald Trump. Now, here's a guy who used his power at the FBI to corrupt democratic process. Here's a guy who used his power at the FBI to cover for Hillary Clinton while trumping up a false charge against President Trump and helping and abetting Comey and Mueller. Here's a guy who cheated on his wife for a number of months with a young chippy in his own department, a woman working under him, having the temerity to call Donald Trump's White House immoral. Is there no hypocrisy meter on the American left?
Well, it really doesn't seem like it. I guarantee you he's going to get a job soon at CNN as a national security correspondent or expert. Just wait. I mean, in the next couple of weeks, he's going to do probably a sit-down interview with Stephanopoulos and do a tell-all thing about how he was the best spy catcher ever and that he shouldn't have been removed, and he's suing this, he's suing that. It's just such a joke, and it's impossible to remove these deep state bureaucrats. But in the private sector, you come across the sort of behavior, you're able to remove it instantaneously. In the government, you get promoted, and it's intractable. You cannot terminate or you cannot get rid of these people, effectively, and I think that's a really big distinction between private sector and public sector abuse. And Strzok is just one of many, of probably infinite abuses that we've seen throughout the government.
Final question. Also on the interior, what are your thoughts about the Omarosa scandal here? This is somebody clearly who Donald Trump brought to the White House as kind of a courtesy, a favor, almost a pity date, if you'll call it that. And Omarosa sort of displaying her true colors now, and that goofy interview she tried to do where she cut it short. She's already contradicted in her interviews her own book.
Yeah, look, she's a very selfish person, not a high upstanding individual. That surreptitiously and unethically recorded the chief of staff and the president and Jared and Ivanka. She's never going to be hired again. She should be totally discredited. And the president gave her the opportunity of a lifetime. Just exit with grace. Go live your life. Don't do something like this. This is the type of behavior that is so unethical. It is so wrong, and it's a cheap shot just to try to sell books and win antics over. I'm pleased the Trump campaign is suing her. I hope they get a huge judgment. I hope they get a court order against the release of these tapes because they're in violation of the non-disclosure agreement. And she better sell a lot of books because I think there's a lot of legal fees coming.
Well, she maybe ought to learn how to read one before she tries to sell them. Charlie, thank you for your hot takes this week. We're glad you're here. We'll see you next week.